The last thing my father ever hid from me was inside the toe of a size 8 rental skate in the lost and found bin at Maplewood roller rink. That old white boot held his real will, and it eventually put my half-brother Marty in a red smock that says skated my inheritance, while every admission ticket at my rink prints his probate-fraud docket number. I am 58 years old, and I spent 26 years as a school cafeteria monitor, which does not exactly prepare you for forensic accounting, but it did teach me how to balance a food service budget to the penny, how to read the wear on a rental skate plate, and how to open a locker with a tension wrench and a paper clip. By the time it all ended, the sale to the trampoline park chain was voided, the forged codicil was in evidence, and Marty was in a back room with a polishing rag wondering where his $840,000 went. My name is Lena. For 26 years I worked at Roosevelt Elementary as a cafeteria monitor. I had given up a promotion to kitchen supervisor because I knew the kids by name, and I could stretch a $1,200 weekly food budget to within 11 cents every single week. I could look at the lunch line and know exactly how many chocolate milks to pull before the third graders hit the counter. I could tell when a child had not eaten breakfast by the way they asked for extra crackers. That detail paid off later because I could read a forged signature like a picky eater avoiding green beans. I also knew how to spot fake ID at parent pickup because the office secretary taught me to run my thumbnail over the lamination edge and feel for a seam. That is not a skill most cafeteria monitors list on a resume, but it saved everything. My father Arthur had owned Maplewood roller rink and a small retro arcade on the east side of Harrow County for 40 years. He was a quiet architect of polished wood and careful binders, not of legal tricks. The rink had a maple floor with one dead spot near the east wall, a vintage Galaxian cabinet that ate quarters but always gave them back on the third bump, and a token counting method that involved weighing buckets with a produce scale. He taught me 2 things before I left for college. First, how to inspect a skate plate for hairline cracks by holding it up to the light and looking for a faint grey line along the mounting holes. Second, how to count arcade tokens without looking at the bucket, using weight and the regular click of metal against the scale pan. When his lungs started to fail from years of floor varnish and cigarette smoke, I took unpaid leave and moved into the small apartment above the rink. The building and land were worth about $590,000, not because the business was booming, but because the land under it sat at the edge of a commercial corridor that developers had been circling for years. My half-brother Marty was 12 years younger than me, the child of my father's second marriage. Marty was the golden child. His wife Paige was an image-obsessed woman with a real estate license, a flat-ironed bob, and a habit of referring to me as sweetheart while reading my bank statements over my shoulder. 2 years earlier, Paige had tried to get my father to sign a listing agreement with her brokerage, and he had refused with a smile that made her face turn the color of tomato soup. Dad died on a Tuesday at 4:35 in the morning. The nursing station called me at the hospice center, and I held his hand while the monitor went flat. The room smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. I did not cry right away because I had to call the funeral home, find his wallet, and remember where he kept the spare key to the cash drawer. By noon, Marty and Paige had arrived in a leased black SUV with 2 clipboards and a notary public they brought from their church. They did not cry. Paige started opening mail and sorting it into piles before I had even finished the death certificate paperwork. She found his checkbook and asked me 3 times where the lockbox was, even though I told her I did not know. Marty started walking through the arcade with a phone camera, saying things like that machine is a collector's item and the floor alone is worth a demo permit. I stood in the office doorway and watched him pull the lost and found bin out from under the counter. It was a plastic bin full of single gloves, water bottles, a child's denim jacket, and one old white rental skate with a cracked heel. Marty held it up and said, "This junk should have been thrown out years ago." He tossed it into the dumpster behind the building. I waited until they left for dinner at a steakhouse with a glazed salmon special. Then I tied on my old work shoes, dragged a milk crate to the side of the dumpster and climbed in. The dumpster smelled like old rental socks and damp cardboard, but I went straight for that white boot. The toe was not solid. My father had hollowed it out with a router, fitted a small brass hinge inside, and covered the seam with felt that matched the worn liner. I pressed the heel, and the toe flexed open just enough to slide out a sealed manila envelope. Inside the envelope was his actual last will and testament, signed and notarized 3 years earlier. On the last page in his cramped handwriting he had written, "Lena, do not trust Marty and Paige." They will try to cut you out. The boot is the key. Save yourself. There was also a small brass safe deposit key taped to the inside of the heel with yellowed athletic tape. The tape had been wrapped 4 times, neat and tight, the way he used to wrap skate laces around the trucks so they would not tangle in the rental bin. I sat down hard on the dumpster rim and read that line 3 times. I had known Marty was selfish. I had known Paige was ambitious. But I had never let myself believe they would go this far. The warning was not emotional, it was practical. My father had hidden evidence in the one place a self-absorbed man would never look, the junk nobody wanted. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family doesn't get to steal from you just because they share your blood. The next morning, Marty and Paige sat me down in the Rink office with a stack of documents. They told me they would handle the estate, the bills, the probate, all of it. Paige said I was too fragile, too tired, too old to deal with lawyers. Marty had already opened a probate case and filed a document he called a codicil. He said Dad had signed it in the hospital 2 weeks before he died. The codicil stated that I was to receive a bequest of $4,500, specifically for a new pair of skate laces, and that Marty would receive the rest of the estate, including the rink, the arcade, and the land. Marty pushed a pen toward me. He wanted me to sign 3 things: a durable power of attorney that gave him the right to sign my name on any real estate, banking, or tax document, a quitclaim deed to the rink that would transfer any interest I had in the property to him for $1 and other valuable consideration, and a stipulation agreeing to the codicil under oath. Marty also wanted me to add him as a co-owner on my checking account in case of emergency. I played foggy. I said I was overwhelmed, that I needed my reading glasses, that I could not sign anything until my head cleared. Marty's jaw tightened. Paige patted my hand and said, "We'll take care of you, sweetheart." I noticed she had a manila folder labeled Lena's medications on the table, and it was empty except for a blank prescription pad. That set off a warning bell in my skull. A blank prescription pad is not a normal thing to carry to a probate conversation. I memorized the doctor's name printed at the top and filed it away. 3 days later, they moved me into their 5-bedroom house in Silverado Hills, pretending it was for my own good. Paige said I needed rest and supervision. Marty said the apartment above the rink was too dusty for my lungs. They gave me a guest room with a lock on the outside and took away my phone charger. They said it was to help me sleep. I noticed a baby monitor on the nightstand, the camera lens pointed at the bed. I turned it to face the wall when they left the room. They also removed the doorknob lock from the inside, which meant I could not close the door and lock them out, but they could lock me in from the hallway. I counted the steps from my window to the ground. It was a 16-foot drop onto a sloped flower bed. Not a jump I wanted to make at my age, but I mapped the route anyway because I knew I was not leaving until I had what I needed. I kept the hollow boot hidden in my suitcase under a pile of old sweaters. I also kept a small pick set inside my purse, stitched into the lining next to a tin of arthritis balm. Marty and Paige assumed I would spend my days resting. I spent them listening. From the guest room, I could hear almost everything. The room shared a wall with the downstairs study, and the cold air return in my closet carried sound up from the ductwork. If I sat on the floor with my head inside that closet and held a juice glass against the metal vent, I could hear Marty's side of phone calls as clearly as if he were standing next to me. Marty spent hours on the phone. He used a lot of words I understood even if he thought I was too foggy to piece together. Closing date, escrow holdback, title commitment, hard money loan, bridge loan, UCC filing, personal guarantee. He was talking to a man named Ken at Aero Park Holdings, a trampoline park chain that had been buying up old rinks and arcades all over the state. Marty had agreed to sell Maplewood Roller Rink and the land to Aero Park for $840,000, contingent on the probate court accepting the forged codicil. He had already taken a bridge loan from a hard money lender called Crown Bridge Capital using a personal guarantee with my name on it. I heard him say, "The old lady's signature is on the loan docs, she just doesn't know it yet." That is when I understood. I was not just being cut out. I was being set up as the legal scapegoat for a debt that was already spent. I started keeping notes on the back of a grocery receipt with a golf pencil I found in the nightstand. The receipt was from a gas station, and I wrote in tiny block letters because the paper was small and I did not want the indentations to show through. The first useful evidence came from the recycling bin in their kitchen. Paige loved to shop. She bought a $1,000 espresso machine, a wine fridge, and a $50,000 SUV in the span of a week. She also tossed unshredded bank statements into the bin under the sink. She assumed nobody in that house would ever dig through paper, but she had never lived with a woman who had spent 26 years checking lunch trays for hidden vegetables. I found a line item for a $25,000 payment to Aero Park Holdings escrow and another for a notary public bond. Then I found a copy of the forged codicil with my father's signature, except the signature had a slight tremor in the wrong stroke. Dad's hand shook when he wrote, but it shook on the downstroke, not the loop. This signature had the tremor on the upstroke of the capital A, which meant someone had drawn it slowly, trying to mimic age. The notary stamp belonged to a woman named Geraldine Hofstadter who had died 6 years earlier. I photographed every page with my phone and put the papers back in the bin. I made sure to leave a few banana peels on top. I also started checking the garbage can in the study. Marty used a crosscut shredder, but he was lazy about emptying the bin. The first night I pulled out a strip of paper that had the tail end of an account number and the words Maplewood Entertainment LLC. I went back to my room, turned on the small LED booklight I kept tucked inside a sock, and sorted the strips by their diagonal cut pattern. Cross-cut shredders make little rectangles with a regular edge, and if you lay them out on a white surface, you can match the serration marks like a puzzle. I used the glass top of the coffee table in the guest room and a white pillowcase underneath it. I taped strips to the back of a crossword puzzle book, using the checkboxes to keep them straight. Over 2 weeks, I reconstructed part of a bank statement from a regional bank. It showed deposits from Crown Bridge Capital in 2 installments, one for $210,000 and one for $90,000. It showed a wire transfer out to Aero Park Holdings escrow for $50,000. It showed a payment to Harbor Trust Title Company for a title commitment fee, and it showed 7 cash withdrawals at a casino ATM in the span of 3 days. Marty was not just stealing, he was gambling with the bridge loan proceeds. I did the math the way I used to calculate food costs per tray. The interest on that hard money loan was 22% annually, compounded monthly. The balloon payment at 90 days would be just over $341,000. If the sale did not close, Crown Bridge could foreclose on the collateral and come after the personal guarantor. That guarantor was supposed to be me. My pension from the school district was only $480 a month after taxes. I would have lost everything, and Marty knew it. The household accident that gave me access came on a Thursday morning. Paige crammed a fistful of carrot peels and a paper towel down the kitchen sink, then flipped the disposal on. It jammed with a grinding sound. She shrieked and called for Marty, who was in the study on a call with the title company. Marty yelled back, "I don't know how to fix it, call a plumber." I walked into the kitchen and said, "I can fix it. I used to repair the school's food disposal." I got down on my knees, opened the cabinet, and found the reset button on the bottom of the disposal. I used a hex key from the junk drawer to manually turn the blades, pulled out a mangled zip tie, and pressed the reset. The disposal hummed back to life in under 4 minutes. Paige looked at me like I had performed open-heart surgery. She said, "Well, aren't you handy?" I said, 26 years in a cafeteria will make you that way." That was the moment she and Marty filed me under harmless, useful, and invisible. It was exactly where I wanted to be. I also fixed the sticking door on the laundry room with a little graphite powder from a pencil, and I hung a curtain rod in the hallway without a level, just by eyeballing the tile line. In their minds, I was a simple old woman with a knack for household chores. In reality, I was running a quiet surveillance operation from inside their own home. That same week, I used my old lockpicking skills. Mr. Arkaffer, the night janitor at Roosevelt, had taught me to open lockers with a tension wrench and a short hook when the district lost the master key twice in 1 school year. He was a retired mechanical engineer from Lagos, and he said locks are just little puzzles that get paid by the hour. He taught me to apply light tension, rake the pins, wait for the click. I practiced on the abandoned lockers in the old gym wing until I could open a standard 5-pin lock in under 5 minutes. I still carried a small pick set in my purse, inside a folded leather case that looked like a sewing kit. On a Friday, Marty and Paige left for what they called a charity gala, but I knew from the email open on the kitchen laptop that it was an investor meeting with Aero Park. I waited 10 minutes, then walked to the study. The door had a cheap quickset lock, the kind with a round knob and a simple pin stack. I used the tension wrench and a city rake, and it turned in about 4 minutes. Inside, there was a filing cabinet with a small padlock. I used a short hook, a tension bar, and 3 minutes of patience. You apply light tension, rake the pins, wait for the click. You feel the cylinder turn a 1/4 inch. You ease the hasp open. The drawer slid out without a sound, and I went to work. Inside were the originals. There was the forged codicil typed on a home printer, with a notary seal for a dead woman and a witness signature from Paige's sister, who I later learned was in another state on the date. There was the Aero Park purchase agreement with an $840,000 price, a $50,000 earnest money deposit already wired, and a clause that said the sale would close in 90 days or the deposit would be forfeited. There was the Crown Bridge Capital Loan Agreement for $300,000, a bridge loan secured against the rink and the land, with a personal guarantee that listed my name, my social security number, and a forged signature that looked almost exactly like mine, except the loop on my L was wrong. I had stopped signing my L that way when I was 40. There were also bank statements showing the loan proceeds had been wired to an account at a regional bank in the name of Maplewood Entertainment LLC, a shell company Marty had created. There was a UCC-1 financing statement filed with the Secretary of State naming Crown Bridge Capital as the secured party against the LLC's assets. There was a falsified personal financial statement for me that listed my pension, a small IRA, and a paid-off Toyota Corolla as assets that I would supposedly pledge as collateral. And there was a folder labeled Lena's Competency Assessment, with a draft letter from a doctor I had never met, claiming I showed signs of early cognitive decline and recommending a conservatorship. I photographed every page in order, using my phone's grid feature to keep the edges straight. Then I wiped the drawer with my sleeve, locked everything back, and left. I added the files to a cloud folder that Iris Delgado would later call the most organized evidence package she had seen from a non-lawyer. I also found a copy of the county assessor's parcel map. It showed the Rink property was not in Arthur's individual name at all. It was owned by Maplewood Rink Holdings LLC, a Delaware limited liability company. That stopped me cold. Marty had filed the probate case as if Dad owned the real estate in his own name. If the property was in an LLC, the will did not control it. The operating agreement controlled it, and I had no idea where the operating agreement was. But I had a safe deposit key taped inside a hollow skate boot, and I had my father's warning that the boot was the key. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed and turned that little brass key over in my palm. It was stamped with the number 314 and the name of a bank I recognized, Harrow County Savings and Loan. My father had banked there for 40 years. The tellers knew him by his first name and always asked about the Galaxian cabinet. I found Iris Delgado's name on the first page of the original will. She was a probate attorney in the county seat, and my father had paid her a retainer 5 years earlier. I called her from a gas station payphone because I did not trust my phone. Paige had taken my charger, so I had been using a solar power bank I kept hidden behind the water heater in the guest bathroom. Iris met me at Harrow County Savings and Loan the next morning. I brought the hollow boot, the original will, and the brass key that had been taped to the inside of the heel. Iris looked at the key and said, "That is a safe deposit key. Your father listed a box at this bank." We went into the vault with a bank officer named Mrs. Oyalaran, a woman in her 60s who had known Arthur since before he bought the Rink. The vault smelled like old paper and brass polish. Inside the safe deposit box was a folder labeled Maplewood Rink Holdings LLC. My father had transferred the Rink, the arcade, and the land into a Delaware limited liability company 5 years before he died. The operating agreement said the LLC had 2 classes of membership interests. I held Class A shares 60%. Marty held Class B shares 40%, but the managing member was me, and the operating agreement had a poison pill. Any sale, transfer, or mortgage of company assets worth more than $100,000 required the in-person signatures of both the Class A member and the Class B member, witnessed by 2 bank officers, and notarized with a thumbprint. My father had put my thumbprint on file at the bank. Marty had no idea the Rink was not in Dad's name anymore. He had forged a codicil to a will that no longer controlled the asset. Iris explained it to me like this. "Your father didn't just leave you the Rink. He built a legal cage around it and gave you the only key." That key was the hollow boot, and the boot was in the lost and found because Dad had put it there the week before his last hospital stay. Inside the safe deposit box there was also a letter from my father in a yellowed envelope. It said, "Lena, if you're reading this, I'm gone and Marty is trying to sell the Rink. The boot was my piece of thread in the maze. Keep your thumb clean and your mind clear. The bank has your print. Use it only when you're ready." He had signed it with a small drawing of a skate key. I folded it back up and put it in my coat pocket. I asked Iris why my father would go through all that. She said, because he knew Marty would try to sell the land the moment the market turned, and he knew you were the only one who would actually read the operating agreement before signing anything. She showed me the signature page. My father had signed as managing member until his death, but the operating agreement named me as successor manager upon his incapacity or death. I had been the manager of the LLC for 2 years and did not know it. The bank had my thumbprint on file from a notary session he arranged years ago. I remembered the day he took me to the bank to update the checking account signature card. He said it was for a new fraud protection program, and the manager had me press my thumb on a scanner. I thought it was just bank security. It was actually the dead man's switch. Any major transaction needed my physical presence, my government ID, and my thumbprint on a signature pad. Marty could not close the sale without me walking into the title company and pressing my thumb to that pad. That is why they were so desperate to get me to sign a power of attorney. They needed my thumb, but they would settle for my forged signature. Iris contacted a bank compliance officer named Tom Okada at the regional bank, where Marty had deposited the Crown Bridge loan. Tom confirmed that the bank had flagged the account for suspicious activity because the deposit was from a hard money lender, but the account holder was a shell company with no operating history. He had already filed a suspicious activity report. He showed me a transaction chain he had highlighted in yellow. The loan proceeds came into the shell account in 2 draws, then 10,000 went to a casino cage advance, then 12,000 to a boat detailer, then 6 wire transfers to an online payment processor, then a cashier's check for 9,000 to Paige's consignment addiction. The account was bleeding money so fast that the bank's automated systems had frozen it twice. Iris recruited me to gather final proof for the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit. She told me not to sign anything, not to tip them off, and not to be alone with Marty if I could help it. I told her I had been alone with Marty for 6 weeks, but I had a hidden lock on my suitcase and a pick set in my purse. She did not laugh. She said, "We need the closing documents and the loan file. If you can photograph them, we can freeze the escrow account before Aeropark wires the balance." I told her I already had most of them. She looked at me like I was either lying or dangerous. I said, "I spent 26 years counting chicken nuggets and finding missing milk money. You learn to notice when the numbers don't add up." She said, "You and I are going to get along just fine." 2 weeks before the scheduled closing, I decided to test Marty and Paige one last time. I had already sent copies of everything to Iris, and the Financial Crimes Unit had opened a file, but I needed to know if there was any humanity left in my half-brother. So on a Saturday morning I put on a show. I clutched my chest in the kitchen and went down hard on the tile. I made my eyes roll back and let my breathing go shallow. I kept my left arm bent under me so I would not hit my head. I counted in my head to keep from trembling. I lay there staring at the ceiling with my mouth slightly open. Paige was at the counter opening a package from a consignment store. She looked down at me, frowned, and said, "Marty, did you get the updated title commitment from Harbor Trust?" Marty walked past my body, stepped over my arm, and grabbed a manila envelope off the counter. He said, "Not now, Lena." Neither of them called 911. Neither of them checked my pulse. Paige signed for delivery at the front door and came back, then stepped around me to reach the wine fridge. She said, "She needs to move before the floor gets cold." But neither of them touched me. I lay there for 4 full minutes until my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Iris with the case number for the Financial Crimes Unit. Then I got up, brushed off my knees, and said, "You two are exactly who I thought you were." The color drained from Marty's face. For a second I thought he might ask how I knew. Instead he said, "You were faking," I said, "and you stepped over me. That tells me everything." After that, any residual family loyalty I had felt was gone. It did not just crack, it disappeared. I no longer wanted to save Marty. I wanted to make sure he never touched another elderly person's bank account again. On the day of the scheduled closing, Marty and Paige dressed me in a beige cardigan they had bought for the occasion, put me in the back of their leased SUV, and drove me to Harbor Trust Title Company. They told me it was a simple formality, that I needed to sign a few papers to finalize Dad's estate. They had told the escrow officer I was an elderly relative with mild dementia, and I would sign where indicated. The conference room had a long table, a notary public, 2 attorneys for Aeropark, an escrow officer named Sandra, and a stack of documents 3 inches thick. Sandra handed me a pen. I sat still. I looked at the first page, which was a transfer deed from Rink Holdings LLC to Aeropark Holdings, and I set the pen down. I said, "I'm not signing." Marty leaned close and whispered, "Don't make a scene." I said, Marty, you forged a codicil, you used a dead notary stamp, you took out a bridge loan in my name, and you stepped over my body when you thought I was dying. I am not signing. Sandra's face went white. One of the Aero Park lawyers put his hand over his mouth. The other lawyer leaned back and started tapping on his phone under the table. Marty reached for my wrist and said, Just press the pad, Lena, it's a formality. I pulled my hand back and folded my arms. At that exact moment, 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Unit knocked on the glass door. Iris Delgado walked in behind them with a leather binder containing my photographs, the original will from the hollow boot, the bank's suspicious activity report, and the operating agreement from the safe deposit box. The detectives told Marty and Paige they were under arrest for probate fraud, forgery, identity theft, and attempted grand theft. Paige tried to say I was confused. The female detective read her rights anyway. Marty looked at me with his mouth opening and closing like a fish on the dock. I said, You should have checked the lost and found. Then I stood up, walked out, and sat in Iris's car while they were handcuffed. The criminal case took 18 months. Marty was convicted of 4 felonies, probate fraud, forgery, identity theft, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison and 5 years of supervised release. Paige was convicted of 2 felonies and sentenced to 18 months, plus a restitution order of $180,000. The Aero Park sale was rescinded by court order. The Crown Bridge capital loan was deemed fraudulent and voided, and the bank clawed back the remaining proceeds from the Shell account. The title cloud on the Rink was removed. I took over as managing member of Maplewood Rink Holdings LLC. I spent the next year rehabbing the place. I replaced the roof with a local contractor, repointed the brick on the east wall, and resurfaced the maple floor in 4 coats of water-based polyurethane. The dead spot near the east wall turned out to be a warped subfloor board from a decades-old plumbing leak, and we fixed it in a weekend. I bought new skate plates for the rental fleet, upgraded the point-of sale system, and brought in a retired arcade technician named Joe to restore the vintage cabinets. The Galaxian cabinet got a new coin door, a rebuilt monitor, and a fresh set of side art decals from a supplier she knew in Ohio. I renamed it Skate of Deceit Roller Rink. It is not a revenge fantasy. It is a clean, solvent business that my father built and my half-brother nearly stole. The court allowed Marty's community service hours to be served at a nonprofit, so I registered the Rink as a community recreation nonprofit. He was assigned 500 hours. I bought him a red polyester smock with white iron-on letters that say skated my inheritance. He polishes rental skates in the back room 6 hours a week, supervised by a parole officer named Roger. Every admission ticket from our point-of-sale system prints a QR code that links to the county probate fraud docket, case number 2024 CF0917, with his name, his mugshot, and the list of charges. Kids ask me why the skate guy is always frowning. I tell them he is learning the value of honest work. My father knew who Marty was long before I did. He did not disown him. He built a legal cage from documents and waited. He trusted me to find the boot. He always said integrity is not a feeling, it is a maintenance schedule. You inspect the plates, you count the tokens, you tighten the trucks before every session. Family is an accident of blood, but trust is a choice and it has to be maintained. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Put it in the comments. If you believe family doesn't get to steal from you just because they share your blood, hit like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.